morning. Man, good to be with you guys here today. My name is Chris Cummings. I'm the lead pastor here at Doxa. And if today's your first day with us, man, we just want to say welcome. Thank you for trusting us with your Sunday morning. We do not take that lightly by any means. We recognize that there are 1,000 things that you could be doing right now, and we're just really honored and blessed that you're here with us today. If today is your first day here, we love to connect with you and help you get connected as well. On your way in, you should have received a program. It looks like this. On one side is a list of announcements. At the bottom is a connect card. And if today is your first day with us, again, we'd love to connect with you, help you get connected. And one of the best ways for us to do that is for you to fill out that card. Once you fill it out, you can do one of two things with it. You can either put it in the offering baskets when they get passed later on in the service, or you can take it to our Connections lobby where you first walk in. That's where our team will be after the service is over. And we love just the chance just to meet you, introduce ourselves to you, and then also just give you a gift to say thank you for joining us today. And so again, we're super glad that you're here. At Doxa, typically the way that we approach preaching at Doxa is what's typically referred to as expository preaching, which is basically we like to walk through books of the Bible, verse by verse, paragraph by paragraph, story by story. But every now and then, we jump out of those kind of teaching series and we focus on something that touches our everyday life in a more focused and direct way. Things that we're walking through, struggles we're facing, questions that we're all asking. And that's where we find ourselves today. Over the past several weeks, we've been in a series called Family Matters. And the whole purpose of this series is really to ask the question, how can we lead and cultivate our homes in such a way that they flourish in the way that God has designed them to flourish? It's to see what we believe is that when it comes to the home, when it comes to the family unit, that God created the family unit and created it to thrive and to flourish. That just like everything else that God has created, that it is all exists for His glory and for the sake of human flourishing. And so the question we've been asking during this entire series is how can we cultivate our homes in a way where they are flourishing the way that God has designed them to flourish. In the first 3 weeks of this series, we mainly focus on like the foundation of the home, that if we can get the foundation right, then from there we can build up a home that truly does flourish the way that it is designed to flourish. And then last week we took a turn in this series and began to practically talk about how do we actually cultivate our homes. And so we talked about parenting and how our children need the law of God in their life, and yet at the same time that we as parents cannot expect the law to accomplish what only grace at the cross of Jesus Christ can truly accomplish for us. And so last week we talked about parenting, and specifically parenting in light of the sin in our kids' lives. And today, as we continue in this series, we're going to continue to talk about how do we deal with sin inside the home. Because here's the reality. Here is the common denominator amongst every single one of our homes. No matter what you do for a living, no matter what you believe, no matter how regularly you attend church, the common denominator in every single one of our homes is that every single one of them is plagued by sin. Every single one of them. And because of that reality, every single one of us, in various degrees, have experienced brokenness in the home that only sin can cause. Like maybe you're in the room today and you're a college student here, maybe you're a freshman here at U of A, maybe you just got back, whatever it might be, and maybe all summer long you were just thinking in your mind, like, I can't wait to get to Tucson, not because I just love Tucson and they have really good Mexican food, but I just can't wait to get there because I don't want to be here. And there's just brokenness in your home. And you've been longing just to escape from that. And we can feel the brokenness in our home because sin is the common denominator. Maybe the brokenness that you feel inside your home right now is in your marriage. That maybe even on the drive in here, that there was already, like, you're already tensed up. Like maybe after work, like every day, it's really hard to be motivated to get home because you just know what's waiting for you there and it's not great right now. And there's sin and brokenness in our home that's plaguing our homes. Maybe it's not in your marriage. Maybe some of the brokenness we feel is conflict with our children. That when you first got this child, that you were like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, and you held so closely to them, and then as they grew up, all of a sudden this attitude kind of came out of nowhere, and you didn't know how to deal with that, and now there's just this brokenness and this tension. The common denominator in every single one of our homes is sin. And so if we are going to learn how our homes can flourish the way that God has designed them to flourish, we got to learn how to deal with the sin inside of our homes. And what we really need to learn to do is we need to understand, how do we pursue reconciliation and restoration in our homes? And that's what we're going to do today. How do we deal with the sin by pursuing reconciliation and restoration? And the way we're going to do that is by looking at one of the most dysfunctional families you can find in the Bible, the family of Jacob. And so if you have a Bible with you, go ahead and open up to Genesis chapter 50. We're going to be in verses 15 through 21. The book of Genesis is the very first book in the Bible, so that's pretty easy to find. Chapter 50 is the last chapter in that book, okay? So that's where we are. If you don't have a Bible on you, don't worry. You can still follow along with the verses on the screen behind me. If you don't own a Bible, we'd love to give you one. You can visit our hospitality kiosk just by this exit door here before you leave today, and just pick up a free copy for yourself. And as you're turning there, let me do a lot of backstory real quick, as fast as humanly possible, because there's a lot of family drama going on right now in Jacob's house, okay? And so what we've been seeing in the book of Genesis up until this point is we see a guy named Jacob. His name gets changed to the name Israel, okay? You might not be familiar with Jacob, but you probably have heard the name Israel, okay? This is the father of the nation of Israel. He has 12 sons. Of those 12 sons, there is clearly a favorite, and that favorite is Joseph. And because he is the favorite, all the other 11 brothers do not like him. They are incredibly jealous of him. They despise him. On top of that, God has given him some visions and some dreams where all his brothers are now bowing down to him. He shares that with his brothers who are already jealous, which doesn't help the situation at all, okay? Like, hey, God's telling me that I'm better than you is basically what he's telling his brothers. They do not like that. They seek out to kill him. They bring him out into the wilderness. Long story short, they don't actually kill him. They sell him off as a slave to Egypt. He gets to Egypt as a slave, works his way up the ladder. The Pharaoh of Egypt starts having these random dreams. Joseph is able to interpret those dreams, and the way he interprets them is he says, hey, what God is revealing to us is that there's going to be 7 years of plenty of food, plenty of grain, followed by 7 years of famine. And so Joseph's advice says, hey, let's make sure we gather in abundance during these 7 years so that we're ready for the 7 years of famine. As that happens, Pharaoh promotes Joseph. He's now second in command in the entire nation of Egypt. The famine hits. His family, his brothers start experiencing that famine. They come to Egypt to find refuge and to find food, and they come face to face with their brother again. As they come face to face with Joseph again, Joseph forgives them of their sins. He forgives them of what has happened. He blesses them. He gives them a part of the land of Egypt. He says, you come and stay here. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to provide for you. And then all of a sudden, in the midst of all of that, his dad dies. Jacob, Israel, dies. And as Jacob dies, the other brothers now become paranoid, and they're afraid that Joseph is going to enact revenge from what they did to him all those years ago. And that's where we find ourselves here in Genesis chapter 50. Look at verse 15. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. What we see here is that the brothers of Joseph are absolutely terrified of Joseph. Now that their dad has died, They are afraid that Joseph will enact revenge and bring about vengeance upon them because of the things that they did to him years ago. And here's the reality. These brothers have every reason, in some degree, to believe that Joseph could punish them severely. Because remember, Joseph is second in command in the nation of Egypt. That is the most powerful nation at this point in time. He has got the backing of the entire nation. The Egyptians love this guy. Literally, after Joseph's father dies, the entire nation of Egypt mourns for him for 70 days. That's a long time. They love Joseph. Whenever Joseph goes to bury his father in the land in which he came from, it says that the servants of Pharaoh and the elders of Egypt went with them. It was so many Egyptians at the funeral that the people in that land looked and thought there must be a great mourning in the land of Egypt. These people love Joseph, and he is second in command, which means that if he wanted to punish his brothers, if he wanted to execute his brothers, torture his brothers, imprison his brothers, you name it, he had the power and he had the favor to do it. And in light of that, his brothers are terrified. They think that Joseph is going to use his power to bring about revenge and vengeance upon them. And so what the brothers decide to do is they said, we need to make sure that we can somehow guarantee ourselves the favor of Joseph. And so they send Joseph a message. Notice that they don't go talk to Joseph face to face. They are terrified. They send Joseph a message. And what is in that message? It is a fabricated message of their father. They're like, hey, Joseph, Dad told us, you weren't there for it. Dad told us before he died to tell you that you should totally forgive us. All that's not a big deal, right? He told us that. So make sure you honor your father. You should do that, right? It's a totally fabricated message. He didn't ever say that. They just make that up in order to earn Joseph's favor. And so they are absolutely terrified here. But here's the thing. Here's the reason why they're terrified. The reason why they're terrified has nothing to do with Joseph. It has nothing to do with what Joseph has done. All throughout this story, what we see from Joseph is Joseph forgiving his brothers, blessing his brothers, providing land and providing food for his brothers and their families and their little ones. We see nothing but him bringing about prosperity to his brothers. It's not like Joseph is just making sly comments behind Dad's back, That's not what's happening. All we see throughout this story is that Joseph seems to genuinely have forgiven his brothers and is seeking to provide for them. And yet, the brothers of Joseph are paranoid at this point, which means that the fear in the hearts of his brothers are not rooted in Joseph's behavior. They are rooted in their own conscience. See, they are haunted at this point by guilt of the sin that they've committed against their brother. See, Joseph at this point in time, he's had plenty of time to deal with the sin inside of his brothers' lives. He's dealt with that. And he's had years in Egypt to deal with that sin. But his brothers have never dealt with their own sin. It's not until this point in the entire story that we finally see his brothers actually confess. They never confess their sin, not to their dad, not to anyone else. They recognize their sin. They recognize the consequences of their sin. They feel that, they recognize that and acknowledge that to each other, but they've never confessed it to anybody else. And because of that, because of the lack of confession and bringing that sin out of the dark and into the light, fear haunts them. You see, the brothers at this point in time, they bought into a lie I think many of us buy into on a regular basis. And that is that we believe that somehow our silence will bring about freedom in the midst of our sin, when the reality is that silence only brings fear. we have this idea in our head that if I can keep my sin just locked in the dark, if I can just keep it silenced, if I can lock it down deep and not let it out, not bring it into the light, that silence will lead me towards freedom, when in reality, all it does is it leads us towards fear. That's where it happens. We see this even in the life of David, the king of Israel, who wrote the majority of the Psalms in the book of Psalms, writes this in Psalm 32. He says, "Blessed is the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord counts no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. For when I kept silent," he says, "my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not cover my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the iniquity of my sin." Notice what David says in Psalm 32. He says, when I kept silent, or when I had this sin in my life that I kept at bay, that I kept that in the dark, he's like, it felt like God's like heavy hand was just like on me. Like my bones shaked within me. There was all this fear all around me. But when I acknowledged my sin, when I confessed it and brought it into the light, he's like, that's when I experienced freedom. And for some of us in the room, I think we've bought into the lie that silence will bring about freedom, when in reality it only brings about fear. And if we are going to enjoy the fullness of life and the flourishing of the family in our homes, the way that God has designed humanity to flourish, we got to bring sin into the light. As painful and as difficult as it might be, we got to bring it into the light so that restoration and healing can happen. So instead of being defined by fear, we can be defined by freedom. How do we do that? Ken Sande, who was a Christian author, wrote a book called Peacemaker. And in it, he identifies what he calls 7 A's of biblical confession. And I think these are absolutely incredibly helpful for us today to give us a framework as to what it looks like to bring sin into the light. And here's what he says. He says, the first step in the process is one that we address everyone involved. We don't just address a few people, but everyone that's involved in this. Like we bring it to all of them, not just like the one key person or the person who's the nicest to us. Like I remember when I was a kid and I had sin in my life that needed confessing, I would always come to my mom and I'd be like, be gentle. You're the gentle person. And I didn't want to bring it to my dad, right? And what he tells us is, hey, address everybody involved. The second step in the process, he says, avoid if, but, and maybe. And here's what I think we can often do when it comes to our confession. We can make confession a platform for accusation. In other words, here's what we tend to do. We use language like, I'm sorry if I hurt you. Or we'll say things like, I was wrong, but you blank, blank, blank. And what we do is, instead of just owning the sin in our life, we use our confession as a platform for accusation and says, hey, I'm sorry that I did this, but it's because you did blank. And so we avoid that. We own it completely on our own, which brings us to number 3, that we admit specifically. That we don't bring our sin into the light vaguely. We don't bring our brother aside and say, hey, brother, I sinned against you. They're like, how? Don't worry about it. I just did, right? No, we come and bring it specifically. We confess all of it, not in part. So often what we do with our sin is we'll confess a little bit of it, but we'll hold back a few other things so it doesn't look as bad. We bring all of it into the light. Number 4, we acknowledge the hurt. We recognize that we hurt someone in the process. We don't tell them, hey, you really shouldn't have responded that way. You shouldn't feel this way. We acknowledge the legitimate hurt that we caused because of our sin. Number 5, we accept the consequences. That if there's consequences that come our way because of this, we accept those things head on. Number 6, we alter our behavior. Here's a crucial aspect in all of this. By no means is this destroy grace by any means, but here's the reality. If we continue to sin against someone the same way over and over and over, and we just bring the same kind of empty apology, here's the real question. Do we actually feel sorry for what we're doing? But true confession should lead to an altering of our behavior. And then lastly, number 7 is that we ask for forgiveness. We ask them to forgive us. Some people would argue that Ken Sande should have a 8th A, and that is to allow time. Because oftentimes when we bring forgiveness and we ask for forgiveness, the person that we're asking forgiveness from needs time in order to bring that forgiveness to us. But if we want to experience flourishing the way that God has designed flourishing to happen in our relationships, we got to bring sin out into the light. And when it comes to bringing sin out into the light, here's another thing that I think that we often do when it comes to confession. I think so often we kind of delay confession because I think in our minds we're not that guilty. Like, here's what I think that we do. I think if we're like 20% guilty and the other person's 80% guilty, we think in our heads, I have nothing to confess because you're the person that's predominantly in the wrong. But when it comes to bringing sin out into the light, we have to own 100% of whatever percent we need to own. If you got 20%, you own that 20%. You got 80%, you own that 80%. You own 100% of whatever percent you need to own in the relationship. And here's the thing, I don't think I've ever had an experience in my life where there wasn't some degree of this I needed to own for myself. I don't think I've ever had an experience where that person was 100% wrong and I was 0%. There is usually almost always something for us to own, and we've got to own it and bring it into the light for the sake of restoration and reconciliation so that relationships can flourish the way that God has designed them to flourish. Fear will always persist as long as sin is casually dismissed, always. And so we got to learn the art of confession, but not only the art of confession, but the art of forgiveness as well. Look with me at verses 19 through 21. It says, "But Joseph said to them, 'Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones.' Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them." After Joseph's brothers confess to him, bring sin into the light, the way that Joseph responds is not with revenge and it's not with vengeance. The way that he responds is with forgiveness. And notice what it is. Notice the theological perspective that Joseph has that allows him to bring this kind of forgiveness freely. He says first, hey, I'm not in the place of God. In other words, he recognizes, hey, I'm not the ultimate judge. I'm not the one who's supposed to bring about vengeance upon sin, that vengeance belongs to the Lord, and I'm not him. He knows his place in that regard. And also notice that he knows the sovereignty of God in the midst of all of this. He's like, you know what, you're right. What you meant was evil. What you meant against me was an evil thing, but here's the thing, God meant it for good. That this is a way God allows this to happen for his good, God-glorifying plans in the world. And what's happened is that Joseph is so far removed from that incident that he now has perspective and he's able to see the reality that everything that happens in our lives is for the glory of God and for the good of our own joy. And he recognizes and sees God's sovereign hand in the midst of all of it. And as he sees all of that, he says, how can I possibly bring about vengeance upon you when God intended all of this to happen to preserve life for his good, for his God-glorifying plans and purposes? He has that kind of theological framework. But here's the thing for us, so often, when we're sinned against, instead of being reminded of that perspective, we immediately run towards anger. And for some of us, we've been holding on to anger for a really long time. And can I just tell you, that anger that you are holding onto in your heart, it is poison and it is killing you. All throughout the Bible constantly warns us of the dangers of anger. We see it in verses like Proverbs 15:18. It says, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention. Ecclesiastes 7:9, be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the hearts of fools. James 1:19 through 20, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Over and over and over again, the Bible warns us of the danger of anger, because anger lodged in our hearts will bring about poison, and it will lead us. It'll kill us. And it'll poison our hearts. It will poison our relationships. And the only way to get that anger out and released and to find the freedom and the joy that only comes in knowing Christ is through the means of forgiveness. You see, forgiveness is not just for the person that harmed us. Forgiveness is also very much for us. I love the way that Lewis B. Smedes, who is a Christian author, Reformed theologian, says it. He says it like this. He says, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you. Anger keeps you trapped in a prison. And for some of us in the room, we've been trapped in that prison for a long time. And you've been holding on to that anger. And you've been justifying that anger. You've got a whole crew of people around you that's like, you know what? You deserve to be this angry. You deserve to bring this kind of revenge upon this person. And we think that we're justified in this, and that anger is slowly but surely poisoning our hearts, and it's poisoning our relationships. And the only way to overcome it is through the means of forgiveness. And you might be thinking, Chris, this person doesn't deserve my forgiveness. I'm like, that's the point. It only comes through the means of forgiveness. Now, here's what I'm not saying. What I'm not saying is that you should bring forgiveness and immediately restore that relationship completely as if nothing had happened. That's not it at all. Oftentimes what we need to do in our lives is we need to bring about forgiveness, but forgiveness does not equal trust, okay? There's a massive difference between the two. You can forgive someone and also say, I need some healthy boundaries as we build up trust. We say this all the time in the Cummings house. We say forgiveness is free, trust is earned. Forgiveness is free, trust is earned. You can forgive and you can still create some healthy boundaries that you need to create. Not only that, but you also need to know that reconciliation does not necessarily equal restoration. The relationship might not be exactly the way it was before. It might take some time to build. And here's the reason why. Because trust is emptied in buckets and it's built in spoonfuls. It takes a long time to build trust. And so here's what I'm not saying about forgiveness. I'm not saying you should forgive that person and go back as if nothing had ever happened. That's not it at all. You might need some healthy boundaries. But what I am saying is that there is a poison in your heart called anger, and the only way to release it is through constant, everyday forgiveness. And for many of us, we've been holding on to that anger so tightly that it is slowly but surely killing us. And it's poisoning our relationships. And here's the thing. No matter what kind of pain you have felt from someone else, maybe it was a friend, maybe it was a child, maybe it was a spouse, maybe it was a parent, no matter what kind of pain that you've experienced, forgiveness is possible for you. And the reason why it is possible is because you have been forgiven much. See, here's the beautiful thing about all this. I said earlier, there's rarely a relationship where someone's 100% guilty and the other person's 0% guilty, but we all have one of those relationships in our life. And that is the reality that we have sinned against God Almighty. We are 100% guilty and he is 0% guilty. And you know what God does in the midst of that? He says, don't worry, I'm gonna step into the picture. I'm gonna come down from heaven. I'm gonna put on flesh. I'm gonna die for their sins. Why? So that I might restore them into relationship with myself. I will wipe clean their transgressions. I will forgive them as far as the east is from the west. I will remove it completely. That's how Christ steps into the picture. What gives us the strength and the power to forgive even the most heinous of sins against us? It is the fact that you have been forgiven much. You have been forgiven an infinite debt. Because of the cross of Jesus Christ. And so, here's the question. Who in your life do you need to forgive? And what's the anger in your heart that you've been holding on to for so long that you need to release? And then likewise, with that, is there anything in your heart that you've been just hiding in the shadows that you need to bring into the light and just confess to someone else? And can I encourage you today to do that? To bring sin into the light, to bring anger into the light, so that we might find the joy in these relationships in which God designed them to have. Now, that doesn't mean that when you confess, doesn't mean that when you forgive, that immediately reconciliation is going to happen. Like, reconciliation takes all parties involved. It's not a guarantee. There's a massive difference between forgiveness, confession, and reconciliation. It takes all parties. But let us not be the people who the reason why a relationship can't be restored is because we're holding on to it so tightly. Come and bring it into the light and find the freedom and the joy that is only found in knowing Christ, the one who has forgiven you. He has forgiven us much, and we can forgive others freely. Let me pray.